The living wage is an hourly wage rate calculated to take into consideration the costs of housing, transport, food and basic essentials for the worker and his or her family. Author and journalist Dr. Austen Ivereigh joins us here at the Bishops' Conference to give us his perspective on the living wage.
A Catholic social teaching enables us all to think about how we treat other people in the workplace, in our charities, in our schools. It also enables us to think about what the right relationship of state to society is, what government policies should be. I mean, it's about thinking how we apply the gospel to the way we run our societies. And it's a wonderful resource for that. Once you start to grasp the basic principles of Catholic social teaching, it's dynamite. You don't need any of the isms, you don't need any ideology, because you have practical way of discerning what is right, what is dignified, what is just for the way we run our society. It's a great resource. I mean, when Leo XIII first raised his voice on this issue, he said it's not enough for employers and employees simply to enter into a negotiation and whatever they agree is right. Of course it's right that there be bargaining and that wages are settled through negotiation. But when you've got a large pool of very poor people who need the work and are desperate to work, and you've got an employer with only certain jobs, then the laws of supply and demand just are not adequate for determining what is the just level of that salary. That's why the popes have talked very insistently, and why the Catholic bishops of England and Wales in their resolution in November 2012 said we must all now as a church think about, are we paying a living wage? We need to first of all call it the living wage. We need to put a level on it, put a figure on it and say nobody should be paid less than that, because in this country, and I know from London where when I was working with hotel cleaners, that they would be employed by an agency. An agency would be being pressured by a big company or a big hotel to drive down costs, would take on those cleaners, often from who recently arrived immigrants, pay them the bare minimum wage. And the company that employed, the agency that employed the cleaners, wouldn't even know what their cleaners were being paid. And I think it's this disassociation between employer and employee, the fact that we just don't know often what our cleaners are being paid. That's why we need to start talking about this. That's why we need to start saying there is such a thing as a living wage, there is such a thing as a just wage. That, it's not enough to say that the market will determine it. And that's why to have a language to talk about this, to have a call by our bishops, a call by our popes is just, well, it's so necessary. And it's fantastic now as a church that we're doing this. I would say living wage is not just for the benefit of the person receiving it, it's for the benefit of the whole organisation, because once you have the living wage being paid, when nobody is being paid less than the living wage in your organisation, it means you can begin to think about everybody participating. You haven't got somebody who's alienated or who's being treated as being less than human. So the relationships of the organisation, therefore, are going to improve. People will feel much more part of a community. And there are responsibilities that go. I mean, this is not just about an employee receiving something like a kind of an extra handout. It's actually saying that their work contributes to the good of the company or the organisation, and that is reflected in the living wage. It enables us all, and this is the purpose, isn't it, of the economy and of work. It enables us all to share in different ways and at different levels in the goods of the earth. The benefits of work, of our labour, are that we can come to own things, enjoy things, benefit from things. And as long as there's nobody in the company who we can say is excluded from that, then we can begin to think about a cooperative enterprise, a real community of people, rather than an organisation which uses people. I think the first thing about the living wage is that we've got to understand what it is. And at the heart of it is, imagine somebody comes up to you in the street and offers you a really good functioning smartphone for £5. You'd think that was a great deal. You'd pay him, you'd go away, you'd think, wow, I got something that's worth a lot more for a lot less. Imagine if somebody approached you on the street though and offered you an immigrant's labour for a day and said you can have this person do whatever you would like done with that person for a whole day, £5. You'd probably want to report them to the police. Why? Because a human being has a value which is not that of a commodity. A human being is, of course, a cost. There is a cost to labour, but the worth of that person is intrinsic. It's not just what the market can pay. So the just wage, the living wage, is all about recognising that value and understanding that in contemporary society, people, the value of labour is what enables them to participate in the good things of society. It's about being able to have some leisure, coming to own your own property, having time to spend with your children. So I would just say, every Catholic needs to understand that the living wage is a kind of a basic dignified minimum. We need to understand what that is. We need to be able to say what the rate is. We all need to know that, whether it's £7 or £8, depending on where you live. We ought to say, yes, nobody should be paid less than that. And once we've grasped that, then the next thing is to say, well, who in our community is paid less than that? And is there anything we can do about it? First of all, in our own institutions, are we paying people a living wage, that basic minimum? Are there companies or businesses in our community where people are being paid less? And can we do anything about it? Can we, as some parishes have done, for example, or schools have done, team up with other organisations locally to put pressure on that organisation to say, look, do you realise that your cleaners, for example, are being paid, the minimum wage here? That's not enough to live on. It's happened and it's been very, very effective. So I think we need to know about it, we need to do it, we need to implement it, we need to pay it, and we need to promote it in our community. I think every organisation, whether they're Catholic or not, needs to pay the living wage. I think Catholic organisations need to be conspicuous for paying it because it's our job to witness to one of the basic core insights of our Catholic social teaching, which is that people have an intrinsic worth and dignity. So Catholic organisations need to first of all set an example. Also, we need to share the testimony, the experience of paying the living wage. That means when people are paid the living wage, we need to hear from them about the difference that it's made in their lives and about the effect that it has on the organisation itself. The fact that people feel much more part of the organisation that they work for, there's less turnover. In other words, we need to be able to speak about the benefits to other institutions and say, look, we as a Catholic organisation do this, it's great, it works, you should do it too.